I am in southern Utah at the moment. I normally live in Las Vegas, but we have a cabin in Utah that we've been hiding in until the death virus goes away.
Oh yeah, the death virus. That's where the Shakespearean
Yeah.
Festival is, right? That's a fantastic little
Yeah,
event.
actually, yeah, that's in Cedar City. We are just 30, 40 minutes up the mountain from Cedar City.
Did you go? Do you like Shakespeare? As a writer, how could you not, right?
Yeah, I do. We actually never have. We're usually not around, or we've got other plans or travel or whatever. Back when we lived in Pennsylvania, everybody does Shakespeare in the park, so we used to go to those all the
Yeah.
time. It was a blast. I love that stuff.
Oh yeah, totally. I think they've done away with it in New York. I don't know if we're ever going to have it again. Things are just going away completely up here.
Yeah, yeah, everything has definitely been dialed back a little bit.
New world, right? I mean, um, you are a speculative fiction author, right? I'm looking at your Amazon list here. What would you call your fiction? Is it apocalyptic?
It depends. I definitely write some sci-fi.
Sci-fi,
So the
yeah.
Achilles Chronicles books are definitely sci-fi, speculative. The Daniel Scratch, the Witch Kind stuff is pure fantasy.
That's why I
Very much
reached out.
along the lines of, yeah. So that's kind of, Ursula K. Le Guin's A Wizard of Earthsea trilogy. It's very much in that section of the genre.
I got that, a sense of that. It's for a teenage, middle grade, or is it?
I kind of wrote it for me, and I tend to enjoy a lot of young adult fiction. So it's
Mm,
probably somewhere between middle school and adult.
it has that Harry Potter-esque type thing to it, right? Going to a school, getting educated in the
Yeah,
finer ways of magic.
yeah.
I love the idea of witches. I love the idea of magic, right? Especially in this country. Are you writing from this in America? Are you writing historically? Or are you making up a whole world of your own?
It's a whole world. It takes a lot of its inspiration from, say, late 1800s, early 1900s. Just as the Industrial Revolution in Europe was maybe happening.
Hmm.
You can kind of read it and you can set it in that in your mind. It's
So
not that world, but it is a world that arrived at the same place.
it's a world that deserves magic, though, doesn't it? I mean, I remember reading the
Yeah,
history of the industrial age and how the smog rolling in the streets of London was killing people. I mean, it was basically just
yeah.
poison everywhere. You want it to be magic. What kind of podcast do you do?
Mine is called Perspectives in Tech. So my career is information technology. I've been in
Hmm.
that career for a couple of decades, and it's a place where people can suggest topics. So all the topics are suggested by the audience, and then I'll find someone who's an expert who can speak to that topic. And it's a lot of career, a lot of how to be successful in your career, where to point your career, which technology should I be following. So it's not like hard tech, more not necessarily soft skills, but the firm portion that kind of falls in between.
I'm running into that now. I'm publishing a piece of fiction and I'm running into knowing nothing. This is the third time I've done it too. So you think I would know something, but I'm just running head into knowing nothing. You get so rusty, right? I mean, you start to dig, you start
Yeah.
to look, you start to research. You're like, I forgot everything. What has been some of the stuff that
Yeah.
you picked up from your podcast that you didn't know going into it?
Somebody had asked a question about, what are the top areas to be focusing on? And I got one of the a regional vice president from one of the big IT staffing firms. Who
Mm,
else would know better than where the demand is right now? And he said, the funny thing is, we're seeing demand spread out so much all over the place, which I kind of knew. He said, actually, when customers come to us now and they want to hire someone, they really aren't talking to us first about technology. They're talking to us about, look, we need someone who's a really good communicator or a
mm.
good team leader or someone who's really good with time management. He says it's kind of flipped over into this soft skills are the hard thing to find. We know they can learn the technology. We don't care about that, but we don't want a jerk on the team. And that really kind of, you know, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I totally get it, but it's so weird that people figured it out.
It's the corporate mindset, right? You need to be able to rely on the employee that you're bringing in. If they can behave with a customer, they can
Yeah,
behave with the internal team and potentially get some stuff done.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, those soft skills. I always heard that 10 years ago, build your soft skills because they are going to come in handy later on. If you can communicate with people, if you can get things done and accomplished,
yeah,
say promises, whatnot.
yeah.
Interesting. Um, Man, there was a guy, excuse me, there was a guy here in Queens who looking for work. You know, he posted on a social media site, I need help. I can't find a job anywhere. IT, you know, fresh out of college, got a degree, maybe a little bit of experience on a help desk. All the information that he's getting from the people who are helping him is basically you're screwed, buddy. If you aren't recruited directly out of college, nobody's going to hire you. You're in the profession, right?
Yeah,
You're doing a
yeah.
podcast. You're trying to help people. Do you think it's more? I mean, my idea for this guy, I didn't write it out because it would have been too convoluted. Is that he has to do something on his own. He can't deal with the corporate mindset. Would you agree?
Yeah, you know that for better or for worse, that there's so many people who are obviously right now looking for a job, but even before, you know, companies were shutting down and laying off, there were so many people looking for a better job. And
Better job, yeah.
it's so easy to apply now. Like applying for a job is like clicking like on a Facebook post.
Yeah.
And so people do it all the freaking time. And that means these candidate tracking systems, these applicant tracking systems, you can post a job publicly for 3 days and get 2,000 applications. And no human being can deal with that. And so now there's algorithms and keywords and machine intelligence and all this other stuff. And what it effectively means is unless a person is hiring you, like unless you can go into a person and say, hey, Joe, you and I have been friends for a long time and you've worked here, can you get me an interview? You probably won't get an interview. And so I've been telling people, the phrase is you have to dig the well before you're thirsty. There's no point waiting until you're dying of thirst to pick up a shovel. And IT people have a real problem with picking up the shovel on networking. Like we're shy people. We don't like to go out to events and just hang out. It's awkward. We're all, you know, too many of us are wallflowers, but you have to do that because the time, like when you need a job, your network is going to get you a job. And if you don't have a network, you probably aren't going to get a job. And it's sad, but that's just how it is. I've got a friend who went through exactly the same thing. Yeah, he lost his job. He is applying everywhere. Like he's dumping his resume into all these systems. He's even doing the right thing. He's doing a custom resume for every single one. And yet when he finally got a job, it was through his network and not a single callback on any of those things he'd applied for.
What I was thinking, I mean, it's interesting because he had a network already in place, right? He had people that he talked to and hung out with and whatnot, however you build a network. Yeah. The thing is, if you don't have one and you are an introvert, let's say complete introvert, you're not able to really socialize and enjoy it. If you do go out deviously enough to set yourself up with a network, after you do so, it's going to fall away, right? And then eventually that job is going to dead end and you're going to have to start all over again.
Yeah, you have to keep doing it all the freaking time. I'll tell people, look, you have to go to conferences. If your employer won't pay for you to go to a conference, you need to invest in your own career. Like your employer doesn't own your career. Your employer only owns your job. Your career is the thing that gets you your next job and you own it. And if it costs a couple $1,000 a year to go to a conference so that you can maintain connections and everything else, then you have to freaking budget for that. And if that means, you know, if that means that the family doesn't take as nice of a summer vacation, well, fine, but you can still put food on the table if you have a job.
So that you would put precedence on cons, conventions, getting out there, pressing the flesh it. Like, I don't know, there's a really great one in New York down here at the Javits Center. They just missed it. The Tech Expo, I think it's called, something like that. I loved it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of in person because people, it's rare. People remember that. And if you're going to build a network and have friends and professional contacts, you can't do that just through a message board. That's another way. I mean, you have to do those online things as well. You have to be out and involved in your field. But that real network comes from the people you know.
I mean, you're talking about fiction too, right? I mean, you're talking about the machine that you have in place with your books. You have to be able to talk to people on network and get opportunities by listening and paying attention and pouncing on it, right?
Yeah, it is very much the same thing. I'm fortunate in that I've been a writer for most of my tech career. I wrote technology books. I've probably written 50 or 60 of them. And so I have a decent following of people.
What is your website?
19,000 on Twitter, for example.
Like 20 years, right? No, I'm sorry. I was going to say
long time.
Long time. I mean, you're talking about 19. Anyway, you're talking the turn of the century, right? I mean, there's so much different technology. Are you interested in the
Oh
writing
yeah.
more than the technology, or the technology more than the writing?
These days, the writing more than the technology, which is why I've stopped writing technology books.
When was the last time you did one of those?
I did a third edition for Learn Windows PowerShell in a month of lunches, probably 2 years ago, I think.
2 years. I mean, if you were
Yeah.
gonna, I mean, do you feel like the industry's just, you have to say so much on the tech, don't you? You have to stay on your toes with technology. Is that what it is? You just don't want to do that, or are you having more fun with the writing, the fiction, the fantasy, and stuff like that?
It's actually three things. One, my career moved into leadership, so I'm a vice president for my
Leadership.
company. I'm not in the trenches. I just don't have the time anymore. And once I didn't have the time, it's like, writing these books is a chore now, because I have to. It's like I'm not writing about something I'm doing. I'm writing about something I have to learn as I'm doing, and it's not as much fun. It's not as easy. But I still wanted to write, and so I started writing fiction, which I'd wanted to do for a long time, and I finally got to it, and then I just love it, and so now there's no reason for me to go back.
So what influences the fiction? Obviously, the tech books, you were trying to get a better understanding of your field, but now as you're sitting down to write these fiction, these books, these novels, what is feeding that? What kind of thing are you kind of filtering into them? Is it your career, in a sense?
No, it really isn't my career. Some of them are, a lot of the ones I'm working off now are honestly ideas I've had for a long, long time. I wrote a book called The Never, A Tale of Peter and the Fae, and it's the first story that I ever really wanted to tell. And I probably started thinking about that in the mid 1990s. And I got a copy of J.M. Barrie's Peter and Wendy, and I was marking it up with a highlighter and Post-it notes, because I wanted to tell this much, much larger version of the story where Peter and Wendy were just kind of minor characters, actually. They were just something that happened in the story. They were a few chapters, but the story itself was so much bigger. Like, where did Neverland come from? Why is Neverland a thing? Why is there only one fairy? There have to be more than one fairy, right? Why is Tinkerbell the only one? So I wanted to tell all that. And it took a really long time for me to get the courage to actually write about it. And I wound up writing other novels first, because I needed to teach myself how to write a novel. And so there was like a very specific progression on the first 2 or 3 that I wrote. And every single one of those helped me, feel like I was conquering some new aspect of novel writing before I could get to the one I really wanted to write. But some of them are, I'm a huge fan. There's a Japanese anime called Guyver, and it's one of these, guy gets a super suit of alien armor. And I really wanted to write a novel about people with super suits of alien armor. So that's an idea that's sitting out there. And I've actually written a few chapters on it just to kind of get the idea down on paper and solidified. But I guess a lot of it is, my own interests in sci-fi and fantasy are pretty broad, and there's a lot of different stuff I like. And I want to write in those same worlds. The downside I find is that once I start writing, I can't read in that genre anymore. Like, I actually sat down last night. There's a fantasy.
I'm with you. I thought I was alone. I can't read science fiction and fantasy to save my life. I pick up a book. Oh, this is such a great concept. And then I get so bored and frustrated. I put it down. Give me a memoir, or
well, what for me is, yeah. And that's what I have to do. I'll start. I sat down last night, and there's this fantasy novel I've been wanting to read, and I started into it. And my mind immediately went to my novel and my world. I'm like, no, I want to read my story. I want my story to be done. I want to spend time in my world. Because it turns out that writing in your world, like, if you really love the world you've created and you love the characters you've made and you really feel for them and they're people to you, writing is just as good as reading. Like, you immerse yourself in that, and that's all that you think about. I'll blast out 10,000 words in a day, and I'll go back the next day and kind of reread. And you always find sentences that need fixed and stuff like that. That's what editing's for. But I can kill 10,000 hours, and I can sit and do it for 6 or 7 hours, because it's just, I'm so into it. And I need to see this thing come to life, and I need to get to the end and find out the secret or whatever.
You don't even know the ending of your own stories.
I do now. I outline pretty aggressively. And so I do know where they're going, but I don't necessarily know the exact things everyone's going to say, or, the color of the explosion and all those little details that make it real. Those kind of come out as I'm doing it.
That's interesting. I always know where I'm going, like a roadmap, and then I just fill in the details as I'm going to that point.
To a point, right? Like, if I outline, a chapter, I might write a very long couple of paragraphs, and that's my outline for a chapter. It's really just a set of notes about things that has to happen. Sometimes they're not even in order as I write it the first time. And then I go back and I start to break that out into scenes, because I use Scrivener, and I found that for me, it's easy if I take the scenes and I can set all the scene files up in Scrivener, and in each one, there's a little section for a synopsis, and I can put my notes about what I'm going to do. And then when I get to that scene, those notes are always there on the right-hand side of the screen. And I just need to make sure that I've written everything that said I had to cover. And then the dialogue and everything else, I don't write that, I don't outline that, that comes. But so long as I've covered everything that's in my little synopsis pane, then that chapter's done, or that scene is done, and I can move on.
Scrivener's an interesting piece of software. I've tried to play with it, but it does not like it when you've written the whole drafts in other software and try to move it into it. I think every time I try, it's like,
No.
I still have the trial. I have like 5 minutes on it. It's like, damn, how the hell do I get this whole thing spread out? You have to write it in there, don't you? Word one in Scrivener.
Yeah, you can. It actually. So I use version 3 on the Mac. I'm not sure if the Windows one or what you might be using, but so I did bring a manuscript in. Yeah, and you actually can, if like I tend to write in scenes anyway, and I just do the 3 asterisks as a scene break. And if you've done that, you can actually put your cursor there and tell it, okay, split this, and it'll create 2 separate files that it considers scenes. And then when it stitches them together, it will put a little separator in for you. You actually can bring an entire story in there in one long, huge document. And it's okay with that. You're not taking advantage of it. But if there's a problem with Scrivener, it's that it has the highest learning curve of any piece of writing software
That's what it is,
ever. But
right? It's just the learning curve is
once
just
you
immense.
invest, it's worth it. It's huge. It's huge. But I look at it this way. It's kind of like a professional tool. You know, I use software as part of my job that had a 3-year learning curve, but it was complex because it did a complex job. And so I've gone ahead and invested in Scrivener, and it turns out I'm really happy I did. It has definitely sped up the process and made it neater. Now that I figured out how to use it to collaborate with my proofreaders, that process is so much simpler. I like it so much better than track changes in Word. I can't tell you how much I hate Microsoft Word as a piece of software. So like, once you get past that learning curve, it's totally worth it.
Yeah, I like documents or Google Docs. It's just real basic, just real basic. How many pieces of fiction you have? 4 novels right now published on Amazon?
No, 3, 4, 5. 5.5 plus a pre-order.
Okay, 5 novels altogether. Great, good for you. Yeah. And you have stuff coming, or you're working on it still with a schedule, or just to see what happens?
So I just put one up for pre-order yesterday.
Oh, good for you.
So that's this, and I have blocked out so that's the 2nd book in a trilogy. I've blocked out the 3rd book. I need to fuss with the outline a little bit more, but I'll probably start writing that early October.
What's your writing schedule look like on a day-to-day basis? Do you have a schedule on a day-to-day, or whenever you feel like doing your writing, you do it?
No, it has to interweave with my job. So sometimes it's evenings. Sometimes if it's a slow day at work, or we just had a long weekend, so I finished a book over the weekend.
Wow.
And that was the one I put up for pre-order, because now it's got to go off and be edited and everything. So it depends. If it's a good day, I can get 3,000 or 4,000 words out while I'm doing everything else. If it's a day I can sit and write solid, I can crank out 8,000 to 10,000 words.
You are a specific type of writer. I've met guys like you, or girls too, actually. It's not, genderized. That you are able to do this thing that I'm able to. You're confident in what you produce, aren't you? Like, your first drafts are pretty much what you go ahead and send out. Wow.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
Yeah.
I mean, I agonize the crap out of my fiction. Like, I'm constantly needling with it, constantly trying to make it better. How do you know you're doing a good job with the first draft? How were you able to be so confident is basically the main question.
Some of it is because I have been writing in other genres, tech books and business books and things like that for so long. I've grown really, really confident in my outlining process. Like, I know that once the outline is done, and trust me, I can write a 60,000 word novel in 2 weeks, but the outline for that novel might take a month. And that's where all my time goes. And that's where I fuss with it. And the reason I did that is because, you know, if you're writing a 50,000, even 100,000 word novel, that is nothing compared to a 1,000-page technology book in, you know, 6x9 size format or larger. Like you cannot screw up when you're writing a book that size, because you've got to write it quickly while it's still, you know, is relevant. And it's got to be super accurate, and you've got to really think about how you line everything up. And it's such a big field that if you want a bestseller, it's about how you put the book together, not the words you wrote. And so I have a ton of confidence in my outlining, because I put a ton of time, ton of research, and a ton of effort into learning how to do that well. And what I've learned with storytelling is it's really not that much different. Like you've got to know where you're going, and you've got to know how to get there. I don't mind a well-paced, you know, a little bit of a leisurely stroll through a fictional world, especially if that gives you the time to kind of experience the world instead of just blast down the plot line as fast as you can. But I don't actually love the Tolkien style, you know, massively epic worlds where there's 18 pages describing this rock on the path that the guy almost tripped over. I'm like, I get it, move on, let's do something else. So I tend to write a little bit more concisely, and I think that helps too. There's a little bit less to get hung up on.
Well, I think J.R.R. Tolkien was more or less writing about the world itself, right? It wasn't about the rock. He didn't get into specific details about things. He got into why, you know what I mean? Why the world was so functional, why terrain mattered, why the history of this and that and the other thing. I mean, that's where he got verbose. I wish he had been more colorful, right? I mean, what do you have? That guy, he's a Utah-ian too. The guy who writes the 1,000-page books every week or whatever, Brandon Sanderson, right? He writes kind of very verbose, very poetic fiction. I hate him. I don't like his fiction at all. I want to so bad. I want to love him, and I picked up his book so many times, and I can't get past the first chapter. Who do you like? Who's writing right now that really enjoy?
You know, oddly enough, some.
But besides the fact that we can't read through these novels, I mean, who do you want to enjoy?
Some of Sanderson's stuff I really do like, actually. I just finished this. So this is the only series I've ever read in my entire life where I can say this. And so it's pretty remarkable. There's a series called Starship's Mage. I think it's Glenn, I forget the author's name.
Oh, that guy?
But it's Starship's Mage.
I've had him on this podcast.
He has, I think, 8 or 9 books. Did you?
Yeah. Actually,
it's amazing.
I met him at the New York Comic Con.
I love the world system.
I'll tell you a story about him. Actually, that dude brought a model of his. That dude brought a model of a ship to New York Comic Con. Brought a model of a ship.
Awesome.
Like this giant thing in a glass case. You're from Pennsylvania. I imagine you've been to the city. You know what this place is like that I live in, right? It's hell. I don't know. It's absolutely miserable in October. It's even worse. It's hot. This dude brought a freaking ship to the Comic-Con, carried it from some ridiculous place like Harlem. I don't know what he said. And he had a heart attack going back to his hotel room with his giant ship.
Oh my God.
The guy he's so smart. He's such a nice guy. He's so talented. But I definitely don't think he's ever coming back to New York Comic Con.
He's such a good writer. I mean, he's on Kindle Unlimited, and I have that, which sears my soul, but I do. And I read 1 and then 2 and then 3, and then I've binge read through the entire series, and like I'm pissed that I'm nearing the end of it. I've got like 1 book left.
Oh yeah.
I'm annoyed deeply because there's not going to be any more, and I'm gonna have to find something else to read. So yeah, I love that stuff.
That's interesting, because I could see his mind kind of being neat, right? I mean, you do these giant models, you have to have a neat mind. You can't make mistakes. He probably writes like you do, right? And he probably writes very concisely.
It is very concise. He describes what needs to be described. He focuses a lot on, I don't want to say he over focuses, but there is a good focus of like his magic system and the way the world works, and you don't get it through exposition, you get it through experience. Like you figure these things out as the characters are using them. Like it's their everyday world. Yeah, right? I love that. That's how I love that little bit of a tease, and there's always a little bit more to pull out of it. And I just enjoy that so much.
How did it happen? Oh, you're not going to tell me, right? It's like a mystery. Oh, sparks leave his fingers, but how did he do it? Oh, he's got the connection. You got to ask him. He went to school for 8 years, and he's got his whatever. That's neat, right? You definitely want to get action going in that way. Glenn Stewart. Wow, I love hearing names of people that I've had on the podcast. He was a neat interview. He was a neat guy. He's up in Canada, if you didn't know. He lives in like Ontario, Canada, or something
No, I
like
didn't.
that. So Glenn Stewart. Anybody else that you can pull out that's kind of writing the stuff that you're interested in?
Yeah. So the other one, and this is the only other one that I've binge read my way through an entire series of 5 or 6 novels without realizing it. And right now the author's name just escaped me, but the series is called The Completionist Chronicles.
Oh wow.
And it is lit RPG, which I have hated every single piece of that I have picked up. And I kind of convinced myself that it was just a crap genre written by hacks.
Well, what is it? What's a lit RPG?
So lit, L-I-T, literature RPG. So it's, the genre is about people playing role-playing game video games, and your main character is in the game. And so part of the prose is, you get the little pop-up window when you gain 10 points of XP or something like that.
Yeah.
And I've read 5 or 6 of them because the premise of them sounded so good.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just such a struggle to get through all that crap. But man, this author has figured out a way to do that and make it seem natural and flowing and real. And there's that discovery of the world that goes with it, and the characters are there, and it's just great stuff. I'm going to look it up while we're talking so I can tell you who it is.
Well, what's absolutely fascinating to me is how deep you're going into speculative fiction. Like, you're not just nestling on top. Glenn Stewart's an indie writer, right? He's not writing traditional novels. I mean, you have to dig pretty deep to find that guy.
No.
And literature, RPG literature, I mean, how fascinating. The novel that popped into my head is Ready Player One, right? I mean, I think that kind of was doing that, right?
Yeah. So the author's name here is Dakota Kraut, just to put that out there, because absolutely deserving. And yeah, you know what? I think Ready Player One is probably mainstream lit RPG. Like, not the entire novel takes place in the game, and with lit RPG it typically does, but you do get all that stuff where the person's in the game. And I'll tell you how I found Glenn Stewart. And frankly, Dakota Kraut and Completionist Chronicles was, God help us all, Amazon's recommendation engine. And I will sit before we go on vacation, and I will aggressively sample my Kindle. Like, I will send 200 or 300 samples to my Kindle, because on vacation, I actually don't read a lot. I like to read in short 5-minute bursts, and samples are great. And if I didn't like it, I delete it. And if I like it, I keep it. And then I come home and I usually get it. And that, I think, feeds back into that algorithm. And so it started at one point making some really solid recommendations for me. And I glommed onto these series. And the plus side of the indie author world, especially for people like Dakota Kraut, like Glenn Stewart, who are Amazon exclusive, so they're distributing through the KDP Select program, and they're relying on Kindle Unlimited readers, is the binge read. I don't want a 200,000 word novel. I want 17 50,000 word, and I want you to just keep writing in that world until you die. And I love being able to go back into a world that I love so much and dive in for, a new story there. And it doesn't take them 12 years to write a novel. You can crank one out because they don't have to be huge. And I love that model. I think it's so successful for so many authors like them. And you could never have had that in the traditional publishing world. Nobody would have put up with it.
Right. I mean, I am doing something similar, right? Where you have a world, you have an idea, and then you branch stories off of that main idea. They don't necessarily have to touch the same characters, but you're right. That's not something the publishing, the corporate world model will take a look at. They want something a little bit more concise, a little bit more easily digestible. And Ready Player One was more corporate. Steven Spielberg directed the movie. I mean, you couldn't get any more corporate than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. It's really interesting in terms of where have you found your information though? I mean, where was your primary source of information coming into the literary career field from the tech field? Did you have someplace that you went specifically?
No. I am.
Damn it. I was hoping it'd be easy. I had my pen ready. I was like, oh shit, one site.
I am a really, really good researcher. And I'm really good at doing a quick scan on something and deciding if it's worth a deeper read.
Mm-hmm.
And I think almost anybody who's really successful in the tech industry has to be a good researcher, because
Oh,
you have to learn as you go. It's a fact of the world.
well, you're reading
And
telephone
so,
books,
you know, I
right? I
mean,
mean, those books are horribly
right, exactly.
dense. They're so horrible to read.
I know.
They're so dry.
I know they're huge. So no, I mean, I knew how to write. I knew that the Kindle Direct program was a thing, because I've actually published some business and motivational books through that channel.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it came time, I'm like, okay, like I know the mechanics of this. I know how to get it up there. I know how to get it published. I know how to, like, okay, I need to go find cover art. So that's a decent Google search to find somebody who can do cover art for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then I need to figure out how to promote this thing. Like, what are people doing? And so I started just a lot of research, a lot of research on how people use reader magnets to build their mailing lists. And these are words I had to look up. You'll wind up on a Facebook group or something like that, and people are chucking around acronyms like NL swap. So I'm like, what the hell is an NL swap? Oh, a newsletter swap. Okay, what's that? Figured that out. Came across Story Origin, which is what I use to organize a lot of that type of marketing activity and list building activity, and reader magnets and direct downloads and advanced review copies and all the things that you have to do. So I'm kind of, it's just really now with the last book, Daniel Scratch, that I'm engaging in that type of thing, and actively getting people to leave reviews for the book, and actively building a mailing list, because this is going to be a series. I've got 8 books mapped out for it so far. I've written 2. So it's got a future ahead of it. So this is the one I'm going to really invest in.
Do you think what you've been doing is going to continue onward, or do you think it's going to be a morphing of that, or thinking of Darwin, but the word's not coming to my mind. Do you know what I mean? It's
yeah, like evolution.
An evolution. Do you think it's going to be an evolution of that?
You mean in terms of the writing, or like the marketing and all the stuff that goes around it?
To explain, it's like I'm thinking of this lady, Joanna Penn. She writes some kind of romance or mysteries or something of that nature, but she kind of really started this thing that you're engaged with, that Glenn Stewart does, that lots of authors have really gotten success at. It's a formula. It takes a lot of work, and you have to do it perfect. You can't mess up at all. It has to be professional work all the way through. You can't look like an amateur, or it's not going to work for you. But I mean, that's been a great model. But going forward, now the world is different, right? It kind of looks like it's ending in a lot of ways. I mean, Amazon's proved to be just as evil as Walmart. Corporations have invaded all of these platforms that you're trying to market on and pushing you down potentially. I mean, do you think that this is going to work going forward, fighting against those kind of odds? The Joanna Penn model, as I call it.
I think something will work. I think it's always going to have to evolve and adapt. I mean, even taking corporations like Amazon out of it, I think, where readers go to be engaged and what readers are interested in at the moment, this whole idea of young adult dystopian books, for example, was really not a huge mainstream thing for a long time. And then all of a sudden we had Hunger Games and Divergent, and it was a massive thing, and there were movies everywhere, and tons of kids are hugely interested in that. Mm-hmm. And that will change. Another generation will come along that doesn't give a crap about that type of thing, and they want to read something else. They want to read, Anne McCaffrey type stuff again, God bless them. And so I think there's always going to be change. Markets, especially around art and writing is art, are always fickle, and they're always going to change. And there's always going to be corporations who try to glom onto them, and those corporations are generally going to be 2 or 3 steps behind. I think, the Joanna Penn model is kind of an interesting thing, and that romance is one of the very few things that doesn't change a lot.
Well, she romance? Okay, I wasn't sure.
It's almost one of those things where it's one of those things where I'm kind of surprised that, Amazon hasn't done a special, sexy Kindle Unlimited, like with just the romance books, so that genre can kind of live in its own little carved off world, right? And maybe they will someday, but I think there's always going to be change, and you kind of always have to look at what's working. I have definitely looked at, Glenn Stewart and the folks who are doing what I would like to be doing, and I've looked at how they're doing it. I've even corresponded with him a couple of times because I'm on his mailing list. I said, hey, could you tell me? Super gracious, gave me some great tips. But you can't just duplicate that by rote. You can't just look at that and mimic it. You've got to constantly be looking at what's working.
Working for them. I mean, is it a personality thing? You think Glenn's personality comes out? He's a neat guy, NEAT, like real tidy. Is that a personality thing that comes out that appeals to you as one of his fans? Is that a personality thing?
Yeah,
Does the author
it might,
like push you towards
it
liking them?
might, because it might. You know, now that you mention that, his writing does strike me as very tidy and well thought out, and that does appeal to me. And when I start to, I don't know that I've ever thought about writers in that fashion, but when I start to think about the writers I really like, they are very ordered and very tidy and very neat, and things might not get tied off right away, but they do get tied off, and everything has a nice structure to it. And the authors I don't like do come across as a little messy to me. You know, like things are just kind of all over the place. I don't really understand why we're going this direction. This feels like a ridiculous tangent. So yeah, that might certainly have been a part of it.
Well, I'm the second one. I'm the one that you have no clue where you're going, and you're like, I give up. So no, no, it was gonna get good. Nah, it's okay, man. Don't worry about it. Um, yeah, I think it's fascinating. So you are happy with the way things are going in the
Yeah.
profession, in the world. You don't have any doubts that, tomorrow people are going to continue to read.
No, I think people will always continue to read. It it's funny because I have a ton of friends. In fact, probably the vast majority of my friends don't read very often.
Yeah, right.
And
Who reads?
several of them, I said, hey, I wrote this book. Would you? And it turns out they're like, no, I loved this. I just, I don't read much because I don't know where to get this type of book. I'm like, oh, okay, well, then you're fixable. I think probably more people would read. Sometimes it comes down to time, and I think right now a lot of people have found themselves with time. Sometimes it comes down to just, I've got other things I want to do. And I think right now a lot of people are like, what I want to do is be distracted from the hell
Hmm.
that we all live in at the moment, and
Yeah.
I just want to get to a different world. And so that's, but there's always going to be some reason for people to come back to that. While media like movies and TV and everything are extremely satisfying, you could write 7,000 books for the cost of one major movie. And so you're only going to have so much good media in that format, that there's just so much amazing stuff, especially now that the barrier of corporate publishing is no longer insurmountable. Like, you can connect more directly with readers and write good stuff. And, I mean, maybe you're not going to, pay all your bills with it. It won't be your full-time gig, but I think there's enough people out there willing to read anything that you can at least have some modicum of successful feelings out of it.
Yeah, I wonder, because I mean, they can't make movies and television without the writing, the books and whatnot. Feed that big time. I totally
Yeah.
agree. It's just impossible to envision a world where there isn't source material, and they borrow from each other all the time. Just the flavors intermingle.
Oh,
It's just a really great environment. If you like movies, you like books. If you like books, you like movies. And I do
yeah.
agree that there is a time issue now. We have lost the ability to be able to sit still and just read a book, because that's all you had to do at that particular moment in time. You watch TV, it's going to be soap operas, but I don't want to do that. I'll just read the book. Now you're reading the book and a word catches your fancy, and the next thing you know, it's 30 minutes later and you're on Reddit looking at pictures of, I don't know, Everest or whatnot. Get distracted. I think that's what the problem is. People need those smaller chunks. 50,000 words, is that too much? Is it asking for too much from people to be engaged in a novel anymore? And by people, I mean high school kids. These kids coming up with tablets in their hands for every single day of their lives. Those are the ones that we're going to have to be marketing to. The ones that actually read now the books, they're dying very fast.
Yeah, my niece is just getting into college. I think she turns 18 in a couple of weeks,
Hmm.
and she loves to read, and she loves paper books because she sees the adults in her life wandering around with their Kindles and their tablets, and she has this feeling of false nostalgia for a real paper book, and so she really enjoys that. In fact, we have a nephew who's the same thing. His dad's a huge tech person, and he will only accept paper books because it makes him feel more like a grown up. So yeah, I don't know. It'll probably go in cycles and stuff. I remember when I was 15, 16, and it would be summer or it'd be a weekend, and I would wake up at 9 o'clock or whenever teenagers wake up, and I would lay in bed reading Anne McCaffrey or Mercedes Lackey until after lunchtime, and I would finally emerge and put clothes on, and like that would, and my parents were like, you're wasting your day. I'm like, no, this is what I want. This is what I wanted to do. In fact, I'm going to go eat and go back, lay down and read the rest of the book. This is what I want to do today. And I'm not sure that we really encourage people to be at leisure. You know, it's oh, go play soccer, or go play, I'll go do this, or go do that. Well, just sit down, just be still, and you know, let your mind do something. We don't place value on that, and so people, if you're being told you're wasting your day, that feels bad. You're missing out on something. What did I miss out on while I was reading a book? I didn't care. I knew I was missing out on stuff. I didn't care. I didn't want to miss out on my book.
I was a reader and as a kid too, but I also played a lot of sports. I had to put those books down or I got yelled at. That was the motivation anyway.
It's almost all books.
All books, only books. Did you
Only books, yeah.
Did you get a degree in information technology, or did you go to college? How did your education actually work out for you? I mean, obviously you're a very intelligent guy. Like your mind is very articulate or neat, tidy.
I did not go to college. I disliked school so much for a couple of reasons that were probably avoidable, but they weren't avoided. So I disliked school. So the idea of doing 4 more years of it really threw me into a near depression. And
Gotcha.
so I went, my last 2 years of high school were vocational technical education. I went for electronics and computer repair, and I was recruited as a civilian employee of the Navy to be an aircraft mechanic apprentice. And so I went through a 4-year apprenticeship to rebuild F-14 Tomcats and A-6 Intruder jets.
That's the freaking coolest thing I've ever heard in my life, man. That's fantastic. That's so cool.
I use zero of that knowledge now. I use none of that knowledge now, but it was a good job. I really enjoyed it.
You impressed the living shit out of me. So there you go. You used it. It's awesome. That's fantastic. So, I mean, that's an education. Too bad you didn't get some kind of like BA, BS type certificate at the end of it. But you get like a world of,
I guess, a certificate, but it's, yeah, it's just a certificate. It's not like a degree. So
it's interesting because when you're 18 years old, your mind works in a new, different way. I mean, if you wanted to learn an instrument, you probably could have very easily. Foreign language, you could probably learn very easily, but you learned how to read technical manuals for something so complex that it was an airplane, for God's sake. And I've looked at the schematics for those damn things. You know, they're not simple. This is an airplane and this is a wing. It's got every bolt is numbered and got a whole paragraph of why it's important and how much torque should be applied when blah, blah, blah. That's completely fascinating that your mind worked in that way.
Yeah, and those were technical manuals. Like the manual for an F-14 takes up an entire room. It is multiple volumes.
Yeah, I was an 88 Mike in the Army. I drove trucks. My volume was very, very thin. It was about the size of my pinky, but it was very complex. Make sure the wheels are spinning in the right direction and you're good to go.
Yes.
And I got a degree in English. So basically the same exact combination of experiences, driving trucks in the Army and reading Walt Whitman. Same thing. So you have a novel right now on pre-sale. I mean, I got to thank you, man. You've been with me just about an hour and I'm not going to keep you on much longer. This has been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate how you put together your writing. I mean, you went from technical to the fiction, and that's just, I can't wait to see what you do. I'm gonna keep my eye out. Where can people watch your career continue to develop?
My website is donjones.com, and I'm pretty good about blogging there, posting what I'm up to. You know, if I figure something out, that's where I usually write about it in hopes that I can help someone else figure it out too.
That's a cool website.
You know what? Hopefully, if you can hop on Amazon and find Daniel Scratch and grab it, I hope you like it. If not, if you want to take Caesar, so this is the thing I've been doing. I've written 8 short stories in that universe. So if you want to get a feel for it, go to whichkind.com and you can sign up for the newsletter and it'll start shipping you short stories. And they're only, 2,000-3,000 words each. They're real short, but it gives you a kind of a flavor. And it was a way for me to explore the backstory of the world that wasn't able to be brought out in the novels, like, the little secrets and things that you're like, what was that? Well, there's probably a short story about it. So they're kind of fun too. And it at least gives you a free feel for how I write.
Would you consider those emails with the short stories giveaways or no? That's not a giveaway.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a giveaway. I mean, that's a type of giveaway. I'm not shipping physical copies of books, but it's free writing.
That's pretty cool.
They've gone to an editor. I've had cover art made and all that stuff.
That's fantastic, man. And so are you. I really, really appreciate the time that you've given me, and I wish you luck.